Well, it is a great honor and a privilege to welcome today to our How Conversation on Moral Leadership, Linda Rabbitt. And I think you are in for a treat to our listeners. You are going to hear some themes that get at resilience, pivoting, finding our purpose, and also staying true to our values. And so, Linda Rabbitt, I have to say, we go back over a decade. And yet, I just want to say, it is fabulous to be in this conversation with you. We're so looking forward to this, but I also have to check in and just say, how are you doing and where are you joining our How conversation from?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. And I'm in my office in Alexandria, Virginia.
Linda is just amazing because I have to tell you, as a friend and a colleague, she founded the Rand Construction Corporation in 1989. Linda's leadership has become one of the top commercial general contractors in the DC metro area and is now the largest women-founded, women-owned commercial general contractor in the United States. That is something to celebrate. And we're going to hear about that journey, I think, from you personally and professionally. And I just have to say, you are generative in your founding. And I know we're going to get into that a little bit more. I mean, your graduate degree, master's in arts at the George Washington University, but also a bachelor's of arts from the University of Michigan. You not only have the scholarship underpinnings and that founding vision, but you also served yourself on many different boards. Let me just say hello and give you a chance to say hello to our listeners that are here with us for a How Conversation on Moral Leadership. Linda Rabbitt, welcome.
Speaking with you, one of the people that I just admire so greatly. So thank you for all the leadership that you've shown as a woman. And thanks for having me here.
Linda Rabbitt, it is a great honor to have you with us. And I know that our listeners are going to hear things in your examples and in your, what I would call just incredibly tough love in all that you do. And I have been a beneficiary of that. And I know our listeners will hear that as we go through our conversation. So much in your background. Who influenced you or who mentored you early on in your career, helped you to shape kind of the way that you approach your life and your leadership, maybe even your framework? So, and how this impacts you still today. It's a little bit of a question of looking back, but it certainly is going to help our listeners get a feel for who you are and why you are and how you lead.
Well, actually, my very first mentor, unbeknownst to me at the moment, was my father. He desperately wanted a son, and he got me. So he taught me how to shoot skeet, and he taught me how to do all the things that he would have done with the son. But what I got to understand was what his values were through all the lessons I learned from him. And the two things he told me that shaped the rest of my life were good enough is never good enough, and leave everything better than you found it. Now, I can almost not say that without being teary-eyed because he meant that so sincerely. Leave things better than you found them.
You know, oh my goodness, you've said that you've learned mainly by making mistakes and had no footsteps to follow. And I'm sure as our listeners heard in the same ears that I heard just now, how has this shaped you as a leader? How do you stay true to yourself and, stay navigating these uncharted paths, right, with inevitable setbacks, because we all have them. We're human. And so I guess it's a how question. How has this shaped you as a leader? How do you stay true to who you are?
So one of the things that I had to really think sincerely about and deeply about. I was well educated. I came from a successful family. What is it that I really did want to accomplish in my life? And one of the things I really wanted to accomplish was not to let other people define who I was. I was going to make a path for myself and begin the journey of who am I? What do I do best? How can I help others? And I started at what is now KPMG as a secretary for $16,000 a year because it was the only job I could get. So that was a humbling experience. But out of that, I got to be associated with the managing partner, a man named Steve Harlan, who mentored me. He mentored me and a man named John Viemeyer, who just retired as the global chair of KPMG. So I don't know how he decided that I was worth mentoring, but the first thing he said to me is, what decisions would you make if you took fear out of the equation? And that has really, those words have really influenced my decisions that I make. If I weren't afraid to do it, what decision would I make?
And you gave a wonderfully inspiring speech at Marymount University where you talked about failure, not as fear, but as an opportunity in disguise, I think is your quote. And I love that. And so maybe could you share with us a moment when you had a setback, something that opened a door you hadn't quite expected, and how you experienced that in terms of impacting upon your leadership?
So I have so many. We could sit here for a week and discuss these, but I'll pick out a few in business. The first, when I went to the managing partner, I said, I'd just like to ask you a few questions. Are you more strategic than I am? And he said, no, you're very strategic. Okay. Are you smarter than I am? No, you're very smart. Well, sir, why do you make 10 times more money than I do? And he said, because I have a corner office. Go find yourself a corner office. So when the opportunity came about, and a woman I knew through the community said she was going to start the first woman-owned construction company, and she was looking for a partner, I signed up for that. Now, I didn't know anything about construction. So that lesson was, the less you know about an opportunity, the better it looks. But I, um, but I needed to make a living for my family. And so I started this company, and I owned 49%. She owned 51%. And before I knew it, 3 or 4 years later, we were up to a $4 million company, and I was making the money that I wanted to make. And she fired me for some reasons that I won't explain. However, it gave me the opportunity to go out on my own. And the last one was 10 years ago. The man I was grooming to be my successor died in a plane crash, tragically died in a plane he was piloting. And I had an entire company grieving. So I had been through lots of things. I'd been resilient in a lot of ways, but I never really understood how to manage grief. And I had to learn how to do that. And I had to learn very quickly because he was beloved in our company and in our community. So those are, in business at least, those were the most uh, consequential moments for me.
So you have paused. You just gave us some wonderful examples of times where you've had big moments. Big moments aren't always positive in your life, where it's required you to reflect and to rethink and to rebuild, especially after losing somebody in a tragic accident, your divorce, restarting a construction company, reestablishing a succession plan. Oh, I just want to pause for a moment here with you and to ask you, as someone who has done large pivots. How do you approach these times? What are some of the frameworks you have used or questions you would ask yourself in these defining moments that might help us in thinking about these zigs and zags and to pause in the moment to be able to pivot into that next chapter?
So when I started Rand Construction now 36 years ago, I wrote 10 operating principles. And the operating principles are used every day at Rand Construction. And honestly, I just wrote from my heart. I just said, you know, we seek to hire the best, or Rand Construction requires a commitment, or, you know, there were 10 of them. What they boiled down to was the 4 R's of Rand: resilience, relationships, reputation, and results. And those 4 R's, and we have conference rooms in our offices that are called the resilience conference room, the relationships conference room, etc. That I learned, you know, just observing what worked and what didn't work. And there were many things many mistakes I've made. But I just had to be honest with myself. What did I do wrong? How can I fix it? How can I be resilient and positive? Because I have devoted myself to being the best mom I can be to my 2 near perfect daughters, and at the best employer I can be.
I'd like to move on to, I guess, something you mentioned that was captured in the Washington Post about the ongoing need that you had throughout your life and your career of credentialing yourself. And so many of us feel that way, right? Of having to prove, even like, gosh, it might be like surprising to some of our listeners to, even as a CEO, to prove yourself. And, you know, we talk about the imposter syndrome and how we show up and how we bring our gifts. So, what advice do you have for our listeners on how to navigate spaces where authority and expertise might still be questioned?
So, in my case, starting in construction, you know, in 1985, my first company, the credibility gap was enormous. And at the time, I was rejected, summarily rejected by our local industry. So the developers didn't want to deal with me. So many people didn't want to deal with me. But what I did have in my quiver was a sense of community. And so I sort of went around the industry and went to the International Women's Forum and became a leader, and went to Commercial Real Estate Women and became a leader, and went to the Washington Building Congress and became a leader, and went to the 2 most powerful business organizations in Washington and tried to show up as the person I really am, which is a servant leader. And I was helping in the community, and the community was helping back, because that's what happens. You only really get to keep what you give away. And I gave a lot of time and a lot of effort in showing, just by how I presented myself, that I actually was well-intentioned, was very moral, and was truly a leader.
You have spoken so eloquently about how mentorship and sponsorship has changed your life. I can say personally how much you have paid it forward, personally and professionally, for people like me, and founding these programs. how might you advise us on what is it that makes for a good mentor? And how do you think mentorship and especially sponsorship, maybe a nuance there, help women to not just sit at the table, be seated at the table, but also have influence while they're there?
So one of my friends from the International Women's Forum uh, asked me to interview for my very first corporate board. And I have plenty of degrees, but none in business. So it was such an honor. And I was, of course, the only woman. And it was Watson Wyatt at the time. And I learned, I gave so much, but I got so much. I feel like through my board service, I've gotten my own personal MBA. And so that was a case of sponsorship. She had seen me at IWF. They were looking for somebody of certain credentials who was a P&L leader. And I got that opportunity. And after a number of boards, I said, nobody in the world knows who this Linda Rabbitt person is. But what I want to teach the world is that women can do anything that they choose to do. And started these programs because I had received um, so much wisdom by watching my male counterparts and how they maneuvered and how they strategized and how they innovated. And I wanted other women to learn how to do that. So now 1,000 women have been through the Harvard course, and they've started their own association called Women Executive on Board, WEOB, Women Executives on Boards. And I'm just so proud of that. Like my high school guidance counselor didn't have any idea that I would do any of this. It just shows that resilience and listening and participating and asking good questions and asking for help are really important. So if I didn't know how to do something, I would ask somebody how to do it. I didn't show the bravado. I showed the human.
Exactly. And that human and that humility and humanity is so part of you. And I just want to say thank you because you have paid it forward in so many ways for so many to be elevated and inspired. And these are really difficult times. I mean, no matter when our listeners are listening to this podcast, I know that that's an accurate phrase. These are difficult times. So how as a leader, we often kind of as moral leaders are responsible for being purveyors of hope. And so what is giving you hope during these times?
Well, I can go back and hear my father's voice and say, I left things better than I found them. And whether it's in business or in your community or as a parent or as a friend, I I did I fulfilled my purpose. So what gives me hope is as a history major, I know all of American history and I know a lot of world history too. And there have always been difficult times. This is not unique. It's difficult for us, but it was difficult 2,000 years ago too.
Fair statement, and coming from you, who is a wise steward of history, but also someone who is a purveyor of hope and who pays it forward. Going back to your answer to the earlier question about who influenced you, and you know, citing your father and trying to live up to and honoring him in his push for you, and you pushing all of us. I want to say thank you on behalf of the Howe Institute for Society and you, Linda Rabbitt, for your resilience and your pivoting example. You're living and leading and loving with purpose, and also staying true to your values and exempling that for all of us. I just want to say thank you on behalf of our How Institute for Society. We appreciate you being involved in our How conversation on moral leadership. Thank you, Linda Rabbitt.
And thank you.